Hey, Russ.
Hey, Aunt. Why are you at my house?
Well, I mean, I just was, in the neighborhood, and I thought I'd stop by. And while I'm here, figured we'd talk a little hockey while we're at it.
Well, I guess that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw this or not today, but Joel Quenneville, former almost Flyers coach, depending on who you believe, not coming to the Flyers again. Apparently going to go out to Anaheim.
Yeah, I don't think he was even in the conversation. And to be fair, and it's probably a good thing that he wasn't in the conversation. Not that he's not an all-time great coach, because he certainly is. But with the way things ended in Chicago, with the controversy there, he needed a spot to land that would be in a media market that doesn't care as much about hockey as Philadelphia does. So a big city like Philly was never going to be on the radar for Joel Quenneville. So for him to end up in Anaheim, that's probably where he needed to go. But he was certainly not part of this coaching search at all for the Flyers.
There's also this idea out there. I saw this today. I don't even know, maybe you've seen this.
Yeah.
That Rick Tocchet is apparently now the #1 target for the Boston Bruins, but there's also been the kind of underlying narrative that perhaps TV is something that might pique his interest again next year. Of course, there's a connection to Philadelphia, especially through Jonesy, so a lot of people have been saying that he might be the #1 option here. Any updates there?
He's the #1 option in Boston, in Philadelphia, and in Pittsburgh. And so he's got connections in all three places. The connection in Pittsburgh, his family lives there.
Okay.
So, I mean, even though the Penguins may not be the most ideal situation for him to go to, when you look at where they are as far as having future talent and prospects, and their financial situation isn't nearly as good because they have big money veterans at the top of their salary situation. It could be an attractive spot for him because it's home.
Yeah.
Philadelphia's got to be a better situation because of where the Flyers are headed. Boston probably similarly too, because Boston's, they know how to build a team pretty quick up there. That said, the whole TV thing is a very real thing. And from what I've been hearing, Tocchet is really considering going back into TV and just not coaching anymore. I mean, you think about it.
It's not a bad gig.
It's a great gig. You may not make as much money.
$5 million plus. If you want to be one of the highest paid coaches, you're looking around $5 million.
So I would say that if Tocchet's looking for a contract as a coach, he's probably looking for $25 million over 5 years.
So okay.
Yeah, I mean, but 5 years is the hang up. If you remember, the Flyers did that with AV, and how did that work out?
Did not work.
Right, did not work out.
Great guy though.
Yeah,
we're still waiting for that martini.
Yeah, still waiting for it.
Yeah,
but
we'll find him.
But if he gets, I think if somebody's willing to offer him $25 million for 5 years, that's some stability. That's good money. Then maybe he would take it. I don't know if teams are willing to give that 5th year. I think that's the catch. And so then if you're Rick Tocchet, you say, do I take a TV deal with, say, TNT and say, go back there and maybe make $4 million a year, but on a 3-year deal, then I don't have to worry about the grind of being a coach.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you got a better deal. So
could ESPN kind of factor in there? I know that he has the connection to TNT, but like ESPN probably could benefit from expanding some of their
They could,
coverage.
but I think that the one thing that TNT has really done a good job of, and this stems from what they had with the guys in the NBA, was to make that studio show entertaining.
Which it is.
Right? And it certainly is. It's far better than the ESPN studio show. And I think Tocchet is more of that kind of personality, and he's not
he's not Messier being all buttoned up.
Right? So I think ultimately TNT is where he would go if he goes back to TV.
All right, so names that have also been linked to the Flyers, Pat Ferschweiler.
Yes. They've spoken to him, for sure.
Jay McKee.
Jay McKee, who's Danny Briere's former teammate in Buffalo, coaching in the OHL, doing a really nice job. I think that one may be more of doing a buddy a favor in the sense of getting his name out there, because he wants to coach in the NHL, and so it's kind of like, oh yeah, well, we interviewed Jay McKee, and get that name out there so other teams might put him on their radar.
And then Brad Shaw, I have to imagine, is still in there. Remember, there were only 2 assistant coaches that were not dismissed.
Correct.
It's Dillabaugh, the goalie coach, and Brad Shaw. Presumably, they would like to envision a scenario where he remains on the staff. I don't think they're going to force the hand of whoever the head coach is, but maybe he remains as an assistant. Maybe he ends up being the guy. Any indication that they're giving him more serious consideration?
I think he's getting more serious consideration if Tocchet decides he doesn't want to come here.
Okay.
If Tocchet changes his mind or goes in a direction where he says, I'll go to the Flyers, I think Tocchet would accept Bradshaw as an associate head coach in charge of the defense. And so I think Bradshaw would keep that role. I think he'd be happy with that role. But Bradshaw also would be happy as the head coach. And I know it was a small sample and the team was out of the playoff race, but the players really responded to Shaw. They really like him. He's a very good communicator. So I think there's a chance that he would be next in line. There is one more name, though.
A guy that happened to be out west, coached some of the most elite players.
Yes.
Hell of a duo. And
yes.
I think the guy's name, Connor McDavid, perhaps, and Leon Draisaitl.
Yes.
Okay. So Jay Woodcroft.
Jay Woodcroft's name has come up. I know that they are talking to him as a possibility.
They are talking to him. Present Progressive. It's happening this moment. They are planning on talking to him. They have already.
I can't
gauge interest.
I can't say for certain. I'm sure that they've communicated
that there's interest.
Whether or not they've actually had their full-fledged meeting yet, I can't say one way or the other at this point. So yeah, I think that's a dark horse candidate that could come into play here.
A lot of people seem to believe that Woodcroft might have been scapegoated. Remember the firing, and then the hope was that it was going to give the Oilers a jolt. But he had success out there. It's not like he's an incompetent guy. Also, if you're looking at age, if you're one of the age people, 48 years old, kind of fits what I think a lot of people were looking for. Ferschweiler, I think, is 53, something like that.
Yeah.
So you're not looking at Tocchet, I think, was the oldest of the potential candidates, 61. But it does look like they're not looking for a David Carl age, like a 30s kind of guy. But it does look like they're kind of looking in a sweet spot of there's some seasoning, there's some experience, but maybe not one of what a lot of people would consider to be like a retread. You're not getting, as you mentioned earlier, like the Quennevilles of the world weren't really popping up as much. Do you think that's a calculated thing? Do you think that it is just that they are interested in kind of, I don't know, having conversations with guys that aren't considered, lifers on the head coaching circuit?
I think that, you want to kind of change the tune a little bit from what you've had, right? Every time that you make a coaching change, you're always looking for somebody who's a little bit different than the guy that was previously there, because if it didn't work before, you don't usually go from one taskmaster to the next taskmaster, and you also don't usually go from one player's coach to another player's coach. So you're looking for something different. So obviously, coming from Torts, you're probably looking for somebody who can relate to the players a little bit better. And so therefore, with today's generation being a generation that likes communication, you either want someone who, even if they're a little bit older, that has that ability to communicate with young players, and if not, maybe someone who's a little bit closer in age to them. So when you look at a guy like Jay Woodcroft, I think he fits that bill. And when you say, some people say he was a scapegoat, I would tell people, go back and watch Press Row Show early 2023. Edmonton got off to that horrible start, and we had Adam Kimmelman from NHL.com on, and we were talking about that situation, because I was kind of hearing that Woodcroft was close to getting fired, and Adam defended him like big time on the show and said that this guy is a really good coach. This is on the players, what's going on out in Edmonton right now. Ultimately, Woodcroft was fired, but certainly did have some success with them there. So he could be a guy that the Flyers are thinking about.
So to recap, Quenneville to Anaheim looking like a done deal. Tocchet, top option in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Boston.
Yeah.
If he's out, Bradshaw gets a look, Jay Woodcroft could get a look, and Pat Ferschweiler is somehow in the mix. Maybe
I think
maybe not as strong of a...
I think Ferschweiler, like McKee, was one of those situations where it's like, hey, doing a buddy a solid, try and get his name out there as being interested in coming into the NHL. I mean, he's
coming off the national championship win, which isn't nothing.
But keep in mind that if you're looking at college coaches that were hot names, you mentioned David Carl. He went back to UD. He went back to Denver.
Signed an extension.
And signed an extension there. And why? Why is that? And I think that there's a little bit more of a reluctance to bring in college coaches directly into the NHL. Now, Ferschweiler's a little different. He's had some experience in the NHL as an assistant coach. So his is a little bit different scenario, but I think there is a little bit of a reluctance because it's so different how you have to coach in the NCAA versus how you have to coach in the NHL. And so I think that the OHL, you have a better chance of finding guys that are comparable to what you need in the NHL. Not just the OHL, but like any of Canadian junior leagues, right? Versus the NCAA. I think NCAA coaches probably need to be an assistant or try the AHL first and then work their way for whatever reason. It's just a little bit different on how you have to manage players and manage a team at the NHL level.
Ultimately, the draft is in June.
Yes.
One has to think that the Flyers will have a head coach in place by the draft, correct?
I would think that they may have a head coach in place by next week.
Well, based on the way that things typically go, if you go out of town or I go out of town or Bundy goes out of town, typically some news breaks.
Something happens.
So I guess I'm going to have to take the recording stuff with me to Florida just based on this. So,
yes,
okay.
exactly.
So,
there you go.
So it's pretty much a guarantee.
Pack it up.
All right.
Pack up the recording stuff.
Well, for now, back to the coffee we go. Here's looking at you, Flyers fans.